Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, New Traceability Regulations, Drive Value and Compliance, brought to you by Seafood Source and sponsored by Kai Software. We have a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. If you have any technical questions or issues using the WebEx platform, please use the chat box and I will respond right away. If you have any issues with audio, please click on the phone icon above the chat window to receive the teleconference info. For those that do call in, to ensure call quality, everyone's lines have been muted. If you happen to get disconnected, you could log on again using the instructions provided in your webinar confirmation email. If you continue to experience difficulty, please email webinars@seafoodsource.com and we will respond as soon as we can. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Please type your questions into the chat box and hit send to submit them. At the end of the presentation, we will have our presenters answer these questions, but please do not hesitate to ask your questions during the presentation as they occur to you. This webinar will be recorded and you'll receive a thank you email with the on-demand materials within 2 business days. And with that out of the way, I would like to hand it off to Ed Stone, one of our speakers for today.
All right, thanks, Jovi. Welcome, everybody. Today, we're looking forward to talking to you about some new traceability regulations that are coming to the industry and how they relate to what is being tracked today and what those requirements will be going forward, how to achieve compliance, what value the end customer sees in doing this, and the reputational value to you as a processor or distributor, and the ease with which you can integrate this information into your current system. So with that said, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Ed Stone. I'm the Chief Customer Officer of the Food and Beverage Business Unit at CAI Software. And I appreciate all of you sharing part of your day with us. And thanks also to Seafood Source for giving CAI and Legit Fish the opportunity to talk to you about how to become compliant with these new traceability regulations, including sharing an example of one of our joint customers and how they're able to achieve this. So for those of you who don't know, CAI's Seasoft ERP has been helping seafood processors and distributors for over 30 years to manage their inventory, improve sales, and optimize profit. And we do this by, as you can see on the screen here, by tracking inbound products from your suppliers, receiving those products and their related costs into inventory, scheduling and executing production work orders to make finished products for your customers, ultimately storing those in your warehouse and shipping them out to your customers. And throughout the entire process, we track the raw materials used in each specific lot that is ultimately sent to a specific customer. And by doing all this, we enable you to exchange data electronically with your trading partners and customers, reduce paper and manual processes, improve your efficiency, and ensure that you've got adequate inventory to meet your customer needs and your sales goals. So I look forward to your questions and thoughts after the presentation in the Q&A section. And now I will hand it over to Mike to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. This is Mike Carroll. I just want to make sure you guys can hear me. I just want to go through just who we are. I'm the founder and CEO of Legit Fish, based in Boston. Legit Fish is the leading traceability company offering verified databases to trace product in the seafood industry. Legit Fish has multiple patents and trademarks around the process of using government harvest data for traceability and marketing, very specific processes that we use. We currently are working with a number of industry players, the U.S. scallop industry, the Alaskan salmon industry, domestic and imported shrimp industries, and we're currently expanding to lobsters. The discussion today is around utilizing our systems jointly with Seasoft, and it's around a bunch of work we've done over the last couple of years, and we're now expanding. Currently, we have about 50 million pounds of product that comes over docks, which would equate to about $1 billion in retail value at the retail end. Ed, you want to go to the next slide? What do our systems do differently from others? Unlike any of these other systems, we ground our systems, the government harvest data. So we're utilizing the government records in order to validate and transfer information that's needed not only for some of these regulations, but certain information that we're using in a marketing system as well. As most of you can understand, a lot of these systems that run today in traceability, if you don't start with a grounded record, garbage in, garbage out is sort of the theory with data and systems. Our system has been configured to all the latest standards, whether it's GDST standard, it's the same data elements across a lot of these companies that are across a lot of these agencies that occur on the reporting side, harvest reporting side with SIMP and with FDA. So go to the next slide, Ed. So one of the big things we're just going to talk about today, obviously, is the new traceability rule coming out with FDA. They're going to announce the final rule on November 7th. It's almost like in the seafood industry right now, it's like the perfect storm, I'd say, where consumers want transparency. We've got a number of federal agencies that are pushing requirements around having harvest data available in the supply chain. The big one right now is this FDA rule that we're anticipating a announcement on November 7th. With all these regulations driving this need, the harvest information in this supply chain is going to need to be wired for utilization for this regulation at minimum. And that's a pretty big task. I think the main takeaway that people have realized is at the first receiver, the dock or the farm, acquiring and supplying that information is going to be very challenging. So go to the next slide. So a big question everyone says is why do we need to do this, and what's the incentive? Obviously, as you look on the bottom here, compliance date is 2025. So, there'll be penalties and whatever with FDA, not until that point, but the systems are going to it's going to take a long time for these systems to start to materialize and actually move data and work according to what this regulation is. The current systems in place, manual systems that, you're putting information into ERP system, and then you're putting information into a traceability system. Some of these are unlikely to achieve the new regulation because of the complexities of this requirement. It's complicated, but the requirement is not a one-up, one-back type of requirement. Retail customers place a higher value on seafood traceability information. So one of our points here is, the harvest information that we're providing for the FDA is also could be very useful to be utilized in marketing, and we'll get into that later. Here's a couple key dates. The big one coming up is November 7th, where they're under a consent order from a judge to, that's the FDA, to submit the final rule. Under that rule, there's still a lot of question marks. I'm not going to say that everybody knows what the answers are going to be, because we don't. There's questions about which of these data elements may they make optional. They've got a very rigorous list of data elements, and there's a big question on which ones will be optional. What products will be exempt from this? There's a lot of comments that were made by the industry to try to get certain products exempt, and we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. The implementation timeline you see here, it's aggressive for what they're asking for. Other government data requirements as well. So as you know, you guys very well know, the SIMP regulation is one that is a challenging one, where you have to submit the harvest information at the point of import for certain species. So we're doing it there. Now we have to provide the same information for FDA. Is there any kind of government data sharing stuff that we can do to make this easier? And that's just a bunch of questions I think we have. So go to the next slide, Ed. So this is just a rough sort of what FDA put forward for the key to 8 elements that would be required at the first receiver based upon what the proposed rule came out with. As you can see, I don't need to get into detail here. You can read the ones highlighted. I mean, these aren't data elements that are provided regularly in the supply chain. A lot of the stuff cannot be provided down the supply chain because some of it's confidential. But as you can see, this is a pretty tough requirement to provide and transfer that information down the supply chain, keeping certain things confidential and others not. So I think what the industry's learned so far about this regulation is the first mile and the last mile are going to be the most challenging for the supply chain to accomplish. The reason why we're here talking about it is Legit Fish has extensive experience working with these KDEs, and it's a leading solution for capturing and validating this first mile data. The Legit Fish solution can work in conjunction with many other traceability solutions, as well as other systems that are out there. We're working towards compliance and integration with all the above FDA, GS1, GDST requirements. Let's go to the next one, Ed. So this is a quick slide. It's just a comparison of the data elements from the FDA rule and the NOAA SIMP rule. And at the point of this slide, not going to get in deep, but bottom line is these are some of the exact same data elements you're submitting for SIMP that now you have to provide, that have to be available with the product as it travels to the supply chain to the retailer. So I think it's important to understand, like, these are the same similar data elements that are reported are contained in harvest records when product is harvested, but they're also the same data elements that are reported at SIMP, and now they're asking for at FDA. So if you go to the next slide, this particular slide is just what's the relationship to the FDA requirement and SIMP? How do they work within the supply chain? The key is the FDA requirement goes to the product in retail, and they have to have this harvest information electronically retrievable with the product. Where the SIMP requirement goes to the importer, and it stops at the importer, it doesn't come all the way through. So here's a number of different points of difference between the requirements, though they are similar in the sense they ask for a similar reporting requirement, just a different point in the supply chain for a different purpose. So go to the next slide here. So Legit Fish has a patented system that traces product from the official government harvest records all the way through to the finished product in the package. What we're proposing here and what we've done with a couple of other clients, and we're moving with a couple new clients, is an integrated system where everything that happens with the Seasoft system continues to happen, but we integrate it in so we were able to complement the data streams and validate the data streams as they come through. That doesn't mean that everything in the system would be validated. It means that through the process from when you start till that 2025 date when it has to be done, you'll have a good amount of products that are validated in your system, and you'll have a system that'll work in conjunction with a Seasoft system. So our system utilizes government harvest databases to validate, but it also uses them to expedite our ability to acquire data and to get these systems and share some of this data throughout the supply chain. So we'll go to the next slide here. So we've been working on, we've got a product we're launching right now, Northern Wind Seafood New Bedford. We've worked on this for a number of years. It is basically, they're a joint client between Seasoft and Legit Fish. We've worked, integrating systems back and forth with data, and we're working to further integrate those systems. That system we're duplicating, and we're expanding to 2 other large processors. The same type of systems, but we're furthering the integration that we worked on in the original project. So go to the next slide. So our solution, basically the processor, at the process, the employee, just as normal, would enter that information into the Seasoft application. No different. There'd be no duplicate entry information for Legit Fish. It would all get integrated with what Legit Fish system as it goes down. So the data will be securely transferred between Seasoft and Legit Fish throughout the processing process. And this information, just as it is with Seasoft, is confidential to the processing client in his system. You decide what information you want to share and with whom. So this is just a demo. This is a consumer-facing demo that we have. So one of the benefits that we've found with this information is you can offer the consumer the ability to have a product that's been validated through government harvest record and offer them a series of consumer-facing marketing platforms that help the value of the product. So this particular platform, if you scan the QR code on the left, and then you take the number 1, and you take the lot code 9007, and you drop it in there. This is a particular client of ours, ButcherBox, who is a large e-commerce company that uses our system for various items. That's the consumer-facing delivery system, and that's the harvest information which we've aggregated. Behind that information on the landing page is the detailed information about that lot. In other words, you're going to have multiple other lots that could commingled into a finished lot. So there's various data behind that can be utilized for the regulatory side of this thing with FDA and FSMA. So this platform, if you go to the next slide, Ed. So this platform, I was at a trade show in January, and the head of protein for IRI, a gentleman by the name of Chris Du Bois, was doing a presentation on the latest technologies in protein, not just seafood, but in meat, chicken, poultry. And he brought up I didn't even know he was going to do it, but he brought up our bag. He did a demo of our label, what I just showed you, which is ButcherBox's product, and he called it out as the outstanding execution, the best he's seen in transparency and traceability across the entire fresh food industry, which I think was a pretty good. I was pretty happy to hear that. We're the first ones in the fresh food industry to be presenting this level of transparency and traceability out into the industry. You go to the next slide. So one of the points that we're trying to make here is the regulatory requirements are really pushing for this data to get wired throughout the supply chain, which is a pretty costly proposition, as you can imagine. We recognize that, but we also recognize that when that data is now available in the supply chain with the product, it gives a unique opportunity for the seafood industry and the retail industry to do marketing with it. There was a consumer willingness to pay study, contingent valuation study that was done, commissioned by the state of Massachusetts with Haddock, just pre-COVID. And the study showed the average consumer would pay 8% more for product that was validated to a government record, essentially for the traceability labeling and product we're putting on this. We also found that same consumer, if they have a master's degree, they make more than $200K a year, and they shop at Whole Foods or Wegmans, they'd pay 17% more. So this concept is a sliding scale, this willingness to pay. So our whole point here is there's an opportunity for the industry to use this information and make their money back on the costs they're going to incur with this whole FDA regulation and all these regulations that are requiring this data be utilized. The other couple points here are, this system bolsters a retail brand. It helps the industry and the retailers feel confident they're not going to show up on 60 Minutes for something they weren't aware of or something in their supply chain that surprises them. It gives them a lot more transparency to what's happening in their supply chain. and we all know that the processors and retailers have been under the microscope in this industry. And a lot of times when these things happen, they don't even know that the problem exists in that supply chain. So that's the opportunity that we see in here. So go to the next slide. So in the world today, we have two different systems, one for an ERP and one for traceability, and that's the way things have operated relatively independently. I know that there's some level of integration that companies have done, uploading and downloading files, but there hasn't been a one integrated system where you're putting in the data in one place and it all works together. In other words, you as a processing client is dealing with one system, one time, everything's visible there. So the bottom is what we're looking at today with this joint tool we're putting out. And the other addition to this thing is we're also working towards getting the data and information that's in your system verified to a government record. So within your system, you can see a verified check mark on a particular lot that has been verified, and you can make a decision whether you want to use it for marketing or not, but at least you can sleep at night and you know that product was legally caught in that country and that information is grounded to a record. Go to the next slide. So one of the important things to understand is when, as in traceability, I mean, where does the information come for traceability? At least a large portion of it. It comes from the documents that reside at the dock and at the processor mostly. And those documents, as you can see here, you got POs, invoices, bill of sales, bill of lading. All these documents have to be reconfigured into traceability documents and presented in a different way. Now, the opportunity that we see, that's Legit Fish and Seasoft, is that if we can do this together with them, and so the industry, as they do their purchase orders, we reconfigure that information so it gets configured into the traceability applications automatically behind the scenes. There's, I think, a tremendous value for the industry there. And go to the next slide. So this is just a summary. Basically, to comply with these requirements, unless you come up with a integrated system like this, you're going to have to be moving data between two different systems, your ERP and a traceability system. So we feel pretty strongly that this is the only way that this is going to be able to be done cost efficiently and accurately over time in a stepwise process over the 3-year period that the industry has to come into compliance. Legit Fish, I mean, we're the only company that really has perfected the ability to use these government records and verify harvest data at a level that no one's seen in the industry. And this skill is also helping us do integrations and more rapidly pull in data from a lot of these docks and farms. So that's the end of the presentation. We can go into questions here.
Great. So that brings us to the Q&A portion of today's presentation. As a reminder, please type your questions into the chat box and hit send to submit them. It looks like we do have a couple questions here already. Mm-hmm. Our first question here: how will these new regulations impact seafood that is imported from, for example, China?
So I could just kind of give you, I mean, I'm not, I don't know exactly how that's going to come out, but the bottom line is you're going to have to provide harvest information associated with that product. So the first receiver would be the dock or the farm overseas. So if products coming through China and it's not harvested in China, you're gonna have to get that first receiver information somehow, some way. And that is definitely a challenge, obviously, when you have multiple hands, going through multiple hands or multiple aggregators in the supply chain. So I think it's not going to be an easy task, and I don't think anyone said it's going to be.
Great. Another question here. What happens in your solution when we have a mix of items that can and cannot be validated?
Can you say that one more time?
What happens in your solution when we have a mix of items that can and cannot be validated?
The way the system's configured and the reason that it's actually really valuable, working, in conjunction with the ERP side of it is it gives us the ability to work with the information that's there already and then improve that information over time, so the user of the system can see the different products getting improve the accuracy, improving the validation rate of those products. So it's, as that starts to move, the user can decide whether they want to use the marketing system for certain products or not as they get further down and they get most of their supply chain for particular items on board.
Great. Another question here. How does this compare to traceability solutions that make us use blockchain technology?
So this system is not it's not in a blockchain at this point. We could overlay a blockchain system with this, but the cost of that would be a little bit more. And in the business, it isn't a requirement at this point. So we haven't gone there. But our system, if you think about blockchain, blockchain controls the record as it goes through the supply chain. So essentially, a blockchain there's no value in using a blockchain if you don't start with a valid or a verified record. So I think that, having the data in your system being verified and being valid, having that data go into a blockchain is then a lot more valuable than if it wasn't validated data.
Okay. Another question here. Any idea of what percentage of consumers are actually scanning and utilizing the system to do the deep dives into the products that they are buying?
Yeah, the utilization of QR codes, I mean, it's not the latest technology. I think we all know that, but it is the most utilized technology out there. One of the limitations that we have, which will change as things develop, is when we build something, we have to build something that doesn't cost anything to implement at a processor. So the reason why we've done things the way we've done them is you would basically have a static QR code pre-printed on every bag, and that lot number actually is what links to the data. Therefore, when you run a processing plant, there's no cost. You don't have to put labels on things. All you need to do is put the finished lot numbers into the system, and we can match everything up and run those systems. But I think that the QR code question, it's a tough one. I mean, I've heard differing rates depending on what information consumers are scanning. I've heard stuff as low as 5-10%, and I've heard stuff as high as 50% for items such as consumers scanning something looking for specific ingredients that they're concerned about. So a lot of this depends on the interest of your consumer. Is your consumer interested in the origin of the product? Are they interested in the environmental and sustainability behind the product? Are they interested in the social aspects behind the product? If they are, they'll start to scan that code. But understand there are new technologies out there that we are looking at to expand and try to get a higher scan rate than we have today.
Great, thank you. Another question here. Is this new regulation applicable to seafood imported into the U.S.? And what documentation will be required from importers and exporters based in other countries?
Yes, it is. It is relevant to both importers into the U.S. And the documentation required essentially, it's similar data that needs to be submitted for the SIMP requirement if you're working with the SIMP requirement, but it's pretty detailed information. So, and it isn't completely finalized until November 7th when they print it, but it's the information in regards to the first receiver of that product would need to be made available all the way through to the product.
Great, thank you. Another question here. Which government agency will be verifying such data, and has an announcement been made?
With this particular regulation, it's the FDA. And the FDA, you know, they put out they proposed the initial rule, and now the final rule will be out in November. At that point, there'll be a period of a year where the rule's not effective yet. So they're saying January of 2023, the rule will be effective, but from January 2023 to 2025, there'll be a period where there will be no fines yet. It's essentially they're going to be working with the industry to get to compliance. My gut is going to be a lot of kinks that the FDA is going to have to work out through this. So the agency essentially is the FDA. The FDA is the one that's going to be, you know, doing different, sorry. The FDA is the one that's going to be doing recalls and doing audits of this. So that's the agency.
Great, we have a follow-up question. How will the FDA enforce the requirements upon processors?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
How will the FDA enforce the requirements upon processors?
I am not aware of exactly how they'll carry out enforcement, but my thought process is they're going to think of it as a recall situation where they have to recall. So they're going to go and they're going to restaurant or a retailer pull a product off the shelf and say, okay, I need to get this harvest information, the traceability information on this particular product. And then they're going to have that information within 24 hours in an electronic sortable spreadsheet. So I would guess that at a certain point that will come to a processor, and he's going to have that information available, whether it's available right on pack or that's available for him to provide all the way through to the retailer. But it needs to be provided, and that's my understanding of it right now. I'm not in any way understand enforcement with them, so and how they're going to carry it out. But it is a complicated rule.
Okay. Is the system GDST capable?
Absolutely, yes, yes.
Okay. Another question here. Could the same system approach be used to automatically verify certified status of products? Example, ASC or BAP certified?
The system has been used to run a BAP certification with farm shrimp, validate a 4-star certification, and control the mass balance checks as it travels through. So we ran a pilot with BAP about a year and a half ago. So yes, that system has been used in that sense.
Great. Another question, is there any chance existing systems as yours could integrate with others designed and put in practice in providing countries?
Yes. And so one of the reasons why we've developed the system here in the United States initially is the U.S. government reporting system, the U.S. industry fishery data systems are fairly well advanced, and it really is a good model, and it's similar model to the other modern countries that do this. But as you get into developing countries, We do have a series of different software packages that can be deployed in order to capture the information and automate this process that we can utilize. But there's also a number of different new platforms that are showing up, whether it's government reporting platform or it's a ERP-like platform that operates at a dock.
Okay. Can you expand on the government data resources that are available to inventory producer KDEs and CTEs?
We don't really have the detail to dive into the details of government data and how that corresponds. It's too complicated for this discussion at this level.
Okay. Another question here. Are there plans for this to expand to ingredients when used in conjunction with fish at our processing site?
We haven't got that far, but that's definitely an absolute good question, and that's something that was raised on a number of, I've heard a number of times, is that there's a series of opportunities with ingredients to integrate that type of stuff into the processing sector. So I see that as being an opportunity, but no, we have not done that yet.
Okay, great. Another question. What would be the implications of a global import control scheme for traceability across the supply chain? And what enabling conditions would need to be in place to help developing countries implement this?
I'm sorry, I missed that, my speakers.
No worries. It's a two-part question. So the first part is, what would be the implications of a global import control scheme for traceability across the supply chain?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm having a technical issue with my speaker. I didn't hear the first part of the question.
I could put it in the chat box as well, but
Yeah, could you? That would be great.
yeah, I could do that. It's a little bit of a longer one, so that might
Yeah.
be
Yeah, I
beneficial.
don't think we can, that's not something we probably can, entertain on this.
Okay. So I'll go to the next question then. Uh, um, let's see. So just to clarify, somebody is asking, Legit Fish has already passed the GDST test.
We all our systems have been developed on the GDST standards. We haven't had a project or a client that's required us to go and do an integration with the GDST system. So everything's there. We just haven't gone through the process.
Okay. Next question. Can you provide a little more detail on how your solution verifies harvest data?
We can, but I can do that with someone privately afterwards, because a lot of that some of that stuff is revolved around our IP, but it's a little complex for this discussion.
Okay. And then our last question here, which might be a little, I guess, broad for this discussion as well. Just let me know. But what economic benefits would there be with a global import controlled scheme for developed and developing countries and small scale fisheries and large scale fisheries?
I mean, the economic opportunity really is harvesters have the ability to have their product be differentiated in the supply chain. So if a particular harvest sector is doing something unique, whether it's they're involved in a fishery improvement project that they want to talk about and communicate to the consumer, or a social project, that they can directly transmit that information into the supply chain the way the data systems run. So I think that's really, if you want to get into how the economic benefits transfer.
Okay, we just had one more question sneak through. Is Seasoft the only ERP that can be utilized with Legit Fish?
We have explored using this with others. We have a number of clients right now that we've been working with Seasoft. So we haven't had another ERP company that we overlap as much with. So it's been a really good opportunity for us to talk about how we can, offer these clients this tool. At this point, I mean, I'm sure this can be done in different arenas, but this has been the most beneficial relationship for us so far, and I think Seasoft would agree with that.
Great. So it looks like we are all out of questions for today's session. I do have a couple housekeeping notes to go over before we officially close out. If you could please fill out the short evaluation form that will appear once you close the webinar. This will better help us serve your needs in future webinars. And as a reminder, the on-demand materials will be emailed to everyone within 2 business days. This will include a link to the recording of today's presentation, as well as a PDF of the slides. And thank you again to our speakers for a great presentation today, and thank you to all of our attendees for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. This webinar was brought to you by Seafood Source. Thank you all, and have a great day.